ChainSafe's very own David Ansermino. David is our Chief Technology Officer at ChainSafe, and if there's ever an inspiring story to follow, it's his. Why? Because he put up a giant middle finger to institutional education, dropped out, and then learned blockchain engineering on his own. He now leads over 70 plus engineers at ChainSafe, so good job, David. But before dropping out, he was studying computer science at the University of Toronto, just around the corner, and he has been very active in the space since 2015, having held leadership positions at U of T's ComSci Student Union, as well as U of T's Decentralized Tech Association. So David is also a good friend, a great dancer on the dance floor, and today he'll be speaking on the recent release of web3.js version 4, which has been recently modernized to TypeScript. It's a huge accomplishment for our team, and when the EF reached out to us a few years ago to give us this grant, it seemed like a long journey ahead. So without further ado, I'd like to bring up David Ansermino, and let's give him a round of applause.
Okay, let's see how this goes. Hello, everyone. Thank you, Tim, so much for the introduction. So yeah, I'm David. I work here at ChainSafe, been here for a minute. And today we're going to talk a little bit about the history of web3.js and what we hope to accomplish with this latest release. For those of you who are maybe not familiar, web3.js is a client library specifically for Ethereum. And so, when you're interacting with the network, you're typically interacting through RPC directly with the node on the network. And so this really provides a layer of abstraction away from that so that you can build more complex applications without having to worry about the underlying RPC interface that it depends on. Web3.js has done pretty well for itself. Today, we have about 4,700 dependent packages and 2.7 million downloads per month. It has definitely been a cornerstone of Ethereum development for quite some time. Although it's kind of interesting to see lately the different developments in this space. We're certainly seeing a lot more competitors come out, a lot more specialized tooling. And so certainly it's kind of survived a long haul of changes and growth within the Ethereum ecosystem. It was the first Ethereum JavaScript client, started in around 2015. And it's really passed through the hands of a number of different maintainers, contributors, and whatnot over the years, which is both beautiful and challenging at the same time. So there's definitely been some turbulence. So as I mentioned, it really has been a cornerstone of Ethereum development, but certainly in sort of the latter part of its life, it became sort of stunted in its growth due to a lack of coordination and planning, primarily, just with the open source nature of the community and everyone really trying to get in there and contribute. It really did just start to fall apart and break in certain ways. So we certainly saw a lot of bad software engineering practices, pretty basic stuff, but just nobody was really there to sort of enforce the rules and maintain a high level of standards. The initial migration to TypeScript was definitely very troublesome and broke many, many times. And there's just a lot of outdated code, right? JavaScript has obviously changed a lot since 2015, and so we really need people to come in and just kind of revitalize that and rewrite a lot of it. And that's where ChainSafe kind of comes into the picture. So in about 2020, the EF reached out to us and asked us to become the core maintainers. And so we have been doing that ever since. And so, we initially picked up the project and started kind of pulling things apart and seeing what broke and what stuck. And it very quickly became apparent to us that the whole thing really needed to be rewritten. And so that's kind of what we've been doing. So we are very happy to have finally released v4. It's taken us almost 3 years to really work through everything, understand the challenges, come up with solutions, and work with the community to really build that out and implement it. But it is finally here. I definitely want to give a huge shout out to our team who's been working on this. This has definitely been no small feat. And will hopefully kind of bring new life into the library and create new opportunities for people to be building with it. I do also want to just point out that the predecessor to v4 is technically v1. There was a v2 and v3 kind of floating in there, but today most people are still using v1 and will be migrating directly to v4. So one of the big features of this release is that it is a complete rewrite. We re-architected the entire library and made sure to write it in TypeScript this time, as that's definitely the place to be these days. And similarly, we support ESM and CommonJS imports now. We also wanted to put a lot of emphasis on the developer experience, certainly very critical, being a developer tooling library. So we've added some fancy things like custom data formatting to really give more control over the data types that you're interacting with throughout the library. We also have dynamic contract typing to make the contract interactions a lot more friendly. And one of the most exciting things is we've also added a plugin system, which creates a whole new host of opportunities, which I'll talk a bit more about just now. And one of the other really important things for us was shrinking the bundle size. Certainly, with all this sort of turbulence that I mentioned earlier, this kind of ballooned out of control. And so with the re-architecture, we've able to kind of break out certain modules that just not everyone's using and just kind of reduce the overhead there. And so yeah, we've gone down from about 327 kilobytes to 177. And this is definitely going to be a metric that we're paying very close attention to and continue to push the bounds on. Most of the time this is being bundled into a front-end application, and so obviously the bundle size there is really critical. And certainly some of the competition in the space is really pushing the limits. So, so I'm going to talk a little bit about the plugin system and kind of show you guys some examples of what it looks like to build a plugin and to use a plugin. When we think about these, there's kind of 3 really interesting categories of use cases to consider. One of the biggest ones is contract wrappers. So for anyone who's maybe never built a dApp before, if you want to interact with a contract on Ethereum, you need a few pieces of information like the contract address, the ABI. You need to go ahead and instantiate that into a contract instance. Then you need to discover the methods of it. And there's kind of like multiple steps to really being able to interact with something that has actually in many ways become standardized, right? We have ERC standards now. And so a lot of this is pretty repeatable. And so the idea here is that we can now actually just write a small bit of TypeScript code that everyone can import. And so as opposed to having to interact with kind of the Solidity output, you actually have some abstraction in the middle to make your life a lot simpler. Another big use case here is custom RPC support. So we've seen a lot of EVM chains come into existence over the last few years. And one of the big challenges they have is a small change in their tooling, whether that's types or the actual RPC interface itself or whatever it might be, forces them to basically fork whatever libraries exist in Ethereum, make these changes, and maintain that forever. So hopefully with this, what you can instead do is actually just modify a portion of that interface and kind of hold on to everything else. And ideally, that allows us all to contribute to the same code base and kind of, all collaborate on something as opposed to having these sort of discrete forks of it that different people are trying to maintain. And this kind of also is the case for extending the web3.js methods. So in addition to building the sort of external facing components. Also internally, you can actually modify how certain methods and features behave within the library itself. So if you do need to customize it for whatever reason, add different types, add different formatting, whatever it might be, there is the methods exposed to enable you to do that. So here's a pretty simple example of creating a plugin. It's really quite simple. You can see here, plugin example is extending the Web3 plugin base, which is where all plugins are born. You need to define a namespace, so that's ultimately the name that references the plugin, and then you can basically go ahead and implement whatever functionality you want. This does have exposure to the providers and all the other components that would kind of exist within a traditional application, and so you can interact with those, modify them, and do whatever it is that you might need to. And then here's a simple example of just using a plugin. So really all you need to do is instantiate it, register it with the Web3 object, and then that becomes a part of it, and you can continue to develop as you normally would. So all pretty basic, easy to use. Recently at ETH Prague, we had a bounty for hacking on web3.js, and one of the bounties was specifically around plugins, and we had two awesome projects come in. One of them is Web3 tokens. I think this is a really great example of what you can do with the plugin system. And so you can see here that they're registering their token plugin. They've got a DAI contract address and a wallet address. And now, as opposed to having to instantiate the ABI and actually set up the whole contract instance, they can basically just interact with web3.tokens, which has support for the ERC20 interface. And so just by querying that, they can create an ERC20 contract instance and be on their way. So this is like considerably less code and just a lot easier. You can imagine somebody coming into the space, their first time building a dApp perhaps. This is going to be a way simpler experience for them than what many of us have gone through. So really cool stuff. You can check out the repo here if you want to dig into this a bit more. This is another example. So we built a plugin for Chainlink. And so kind of a similar concept here. You can see we're instantiating it, we're registering it, and now we actually have the ability to just call get price, and everything's kind of abstracted away for you. And this also kind of demonstrates another aspect to this, which is that you can start to define constants and perhaps even remove even more ambiguity for the developer, just to make things really streamlined and easy to use. And so lots of potential there still to be discovered. Definitely recommend taking a look and thinking about what you can build there. Yeah, certainly happy to chat about ideas or anything like that. Now I'm going to talk a little bit about the future of Web3.js beyond this. Obviously, we've just gotten this big release out, but that's certainly not the end. One of the things that we would like to do, and this is still kind of in discussion, but we do intend to deprecate v1. It's really difficult to maintain. To be honest, that's one of the biggest challenges in actually getting v4 out, has been maintaining v1 alongside of it. As I mentioned, it's not code that's written to be maintained, and as a result, it requires a lot of time and resources. We certainly will continue to implement critical bug fixes and support everyone in that migration. It's rather trivial, but certainly for specific use cases, it can be a little more involved. So we do want to provide a lot more documentation, guides, tooling around that. Stabilized version 4, so we do have like a full release out, but obviously there's still more that we can do there. We do want to continue to increase our test coverage, and again, just build more documentation and community resources. We definitely hope to go to more hackathons and just be more hands-on with the community. Obviously, as the space continues to grow and as the kind of variety of tooling grows and grows, we really do want to be on the forefront, on the ground, like working with developers, coming into the space, helping them navigate it, and really kind of getting them off on the right foot. And then, of course, the plugin ecosystem. So we hope over the next year to see a whole host of plugins being developed, both by ChainSafe and by the community. Hopefully kind of reduce the duplicate code that exists in the Web3 space. If more of us can really leverage the same code base, we all win. And so really want to look at what we can do to just ensure that the different sort of use cases that are currently being supported can continue to be inside a plug-in supported web3.js sort of system. And then another really big part about plugins is discoverability. And so we believe that there's a huge opportunity in kind of giving developers a toolkit that they can then kind of pick and choose from. So we're kind of imagining some sort of repo or some place where people can go and say, these are the 50 different applications I can interact with, or even just like different technologies, right? Like there could be a plugin for libp2p or DRAND or whatever it might be. And it just makes that developer experience far more streamlined and allows people to build more complex applications in a simpler way. And so people need to be aware of what they can build, and that's really what we're hoping to do with that. Yeah, we are hiring, fun fact, in case you didn't know, chainsafe.io/careers. But yeah, that's all I have. Thank you so much. Happy to take any questions. Any comments? Any questions? Any plugin ideas?
What's better, web3.js or ethers.js?
It depends. Yeah, we are huge fans of ethers, so they both have their time and place. Cool. Yeah.
Very interested in having a Python equivalent. I know there's web3.py, but it's quite, I don't know. And I think Brownie also wraps around it, but it also makes it gives you so many things you don't need, and then you're like having some more RPC calls. I'm wondering if there's any interest in Python now. 8 works. What? 8 works. 8 works. 8 works.
Yeah.
That's your Python toolkit.
If I can throw a question back at you, what are you trying to do in Python?
It's like a decentralized Python network. So like a network that it's a bunch of APIs talking to each other. And
Okay.
they're all Python objects. So like
Yeah.
smart contracts, but there's no Merkle tree to verify the state. It's just gRPC servers.
Interesting. Okay. Very cool. Very cool. Nice. Yeah, we don't do a lot of Python, unfortunately, but right time, right place. Any other questions? All right. Thank you very much.